Welcome back to another episode of Shit That's Just Life podcast with your favorite life coach, me, Cecile. Today, we're diving into a personal and thought provoking conversation about creativity and resilience and the emotional journey of the lockdown. I'm joined by author In Chamchoun to explore the heart behind their book, COVID, The Worldly Wilds of a Mind Under Lockdown. Let's get into it. For those just discovering your work, how would you describe this book in your own words?
A commentary on the shared experience of the epidemic and being under lockdown, because it was a shared experience. It was a global experience. We were all under lockdown and all kind of sort of having to face our demons and sort of kind of do a little bit of work and introspection on ourselves.
What was the part of yourself that you were able to now notice, reflect on?
I think the part of myself that I was probably able to sort of reflect on was that, I think my confidence and my sense of self had probably had probably ebbed away over the years. Where I'd kind of taken a back seat because obviously, I mean, I was a mother to four children, and I was putting my children first and putting my own needs last. And I think sort of what COVID did was it gave me a time to kind of examine myself, a little bit of soul searching, and just to sort of reconnect with myself and say that I am a person of worth, and that I can do this because I think as I told you, I always wanted to be a writer as a young child, but after I got married, I kind of dismissed it as a foolish dream that it could never happen. It was not accomplishable for me. That I wasn't necessarily good enough.
We were all kind of in that lockdown. Did it bring down confidence, or would you say it helped you gain your confidence because you were able to kind of sit down and think through things?
I think I think it actually helped me gain confidence, and I would say it helped me gain confidence because what it does is, I suppose, it examines, say, I mean, certain aspects of it examines past trauma, and I find that poetry is very therapeutic in the sense that it allows you to sort of kind of dissect your thoughts and your feelings and make sense of them, and in a sense, come to peace with them.
Okay. During COVID, for me, it gave me a lot of downtime to actually self reflect,
Yeah.
pick out my pros and cons. What are the things that I want to be better at in life? How do I want to challenge myself? How do I continue to be less harsh on myself, more self love, being very, very light and gentle with myself? I
Yes,
can definitely
necessary in life, because I mean, I think often probably we're hardest on ourselves than anybody else could possibly be. We're our
yeah.
own worst critic a lot of the times, and I think it's a valuable skill to learn, just to be kinder to yourself.
Yes, I think especially being able to do it, it was just an unfortunate time that we had to go down on the lockdown, but it was
Yeah.
also fortunate to be able to go through that self-reflecting process.
Oh, a lot of people time to kind of explore things that maybe they were interested in or they had wanted to learn, but they hadn't. I mean, I certainly noticed that during COVID, people were learning to play musical instruments or learning a new language or exploring, other sides of
Yeah.
themselves. So I think it certainly provided us with that, because we had a lot of time on our hands and we could finally devote that time to those things that we had neglected in our day-to-day
Mhm.
lives.
What moment or feeling during the lockdown really sparked the idea to start writing?
Started writing naturally, really. I mean, I got like the first two lines or the first stanza of a poem in my head, and I kind of just wrote it down. And I wasn't necessarily writing as a serious writer with the intention of having it published or anything like that. It was just sort of the inspiration came at that time, and then I started writing that particular poem. And then afterwards, I mean, I'd seen, I think, a poetry competition, which and I submitted that piece to the competition. I didn't hear back from the competition, so I assumed that obviously I hadn't done very well. But then a publisher contacted me who said that they'd seen the poem, they were really interested in a manuscript. Did I have a manuscript of 3,000 words or more? I didn't at the time, but I said I could certainly get one. So I started writing like mad, and then I finally had the full collection, and I was like, yes, okay, I have the collection now. Are we going to publish? And then the publisher turned around and said, yes, yes, of course we're going to publish. We love the book, blah, blah, blah. We're going to charge you £5,000 to publish. So it was a vanity press. So at that stage, I just thought, well, I'm not going to pay to have my work published. I would want my work to be published on merit. That direction, because to be honest, when I first started writing that poem, I had no idea. I had no intention of actually pursuing being published seriously at that stage.
So it was more of like a process that you had to go through before you can actually fully publish it.
Yeah.
Okay, getting into the whirly winds of a mind under lockdown. I was very curious as to why was it important for you to capture your thoughts during that specific time.
No, it was important because I thought that it was something that probably most people could relate to, in the sense that we were all under lockdown. Most of us with our family or with close ones, or we couldn't see, family because of the lockdown and things like that. And I just I was going through a certain amount of emotional upheaval with myself, with my father's diagnosis with Alzheimer's, and sort of having stressy teenagers in the house who were at each other's throat half of the time, and then menopause, where sort of like my mood was sort of up 1 minute and down the next, where I just felt like I had nothing to live for, and it was kind of a mishmash of emotions. And then I started writing them down because it certainly helped me. As I said, it is a very therapeutic process. But at the same time, I also thought, well, this is probably something that probably a lot of people can identify with, whether it's, things like mental health, or whether it's, like loss or identity, when we're questioning who we are, what our purpose is in life.
Okay, I'm wondering, while you're speaking about that, how was the process emotionally? I can only imagine.
And I was prompted to write that book because what happened was, I was examined at 13, and it was very traumatic for me, and I kind of like blocked it completely out of my head. I didn't really think about it again. I kind of just shrugged it off as just something that had to be done, and I had no say in. And I think it wasn't until I was pregnant when I was 18, and I went to the doctor, and I had a vaginal examination, and it was kind of like suddenly the trauma just came rushing back at me. It was like flashbacks, and I was actually hyperventilating, and I didn't realize just how much that event itself had affected me, because I had kind of like shut it out of my mind for so long.
Okay, I can see that because it seems like it was just everything coming up at once.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
I think so, like, I mean, for that piece, that was prompted by that experience, because I realized I had just buried the trauma rather than actually confronting it and dealing with it.
I noticed that the title suggests this, it kind of suggests chaos and exploration.
Yeah.
What did you really discover about your mind that really surprised you? What do you think you discovered that really surprised you about your mental?
Probably, a lot stronger than I thought I was. And I discovered, I suppose, that writing, that passion for writing again, because I hadn't written for many, many years when I was parenting my children, and it opened that gateway for me. And I suppose in a sense, writing itself, by writing, it gave me that direction in life as well. Is that I can pursue this. I'm capable of doing this.
Hmm. Was it like a lot of self-doubt at first and
Oh,
until
definitely. As I said, because I started going through menopause, and then my children had left home. My third son was about to go to university, and and I was feeling kind of like surplus to requirements. Like, what
yeah,
do I do now?
it's like everything coming at once and you're like on an emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
I can see that. And I can only imagine how you were able to navigate and put this to pen to paper, reliving, or not even reliving, living through those emotions and then sitting down, able to put it pen to paper, express everything that's going on mentally. I can see that being a roller coaster trying to navigate, you know.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's emotionally draining with some pieces where I've just felt completely emotionally drained after I've written it.
When was the moment where you're like, I feel relieved now.
Yeah, I think, like, not necessarily when I was writing it, because I mean, what I tend to do is if I write a piece, I'll write it and then I'll kind of like leave it alone and then come back to it maybe a day later. So when I was writing, I did find it very emotionally challenging. But I think, like a day after I came back to the piece and then I read through the piece, and, and I felt really good about it, and I felt at peace with it. And I thought, like, there isn't I've kind of resolved that internal conflict within me, and I feel kind of at peace with this now. There's also a piece in there about menopause, because, as I said, I started menopause, and I think, writing through that kind of roller coaster of emotions. I mean, menopause sometimes feels like a second adolescence. I mean, you're sort of like you're just going from one mood to the next, and
Yeah.
but I mean, I felt like writing about it certainly helped.
What was the pros and cons of the experience of going through menopause while being in lockdown? What are some pros and cons?
I'm not sure there were too many pros, because I suspected I was going through menopause, but I wasn't necessarily sure, and I
Hmm.
wasn't able to see a doctor. I tried to call a doctor, I couldn't get through to a doctor, and then I'd contacted, I kept on contacting, and I think they said they wouldn't be able to see me in person. And I said, well, you're going to need to see me in person in order to take bloods to assess whether I am actually menopausal. And I think that was probably about, it wasn't until they started easing lockdown that I
Yeah.
actually went to see the doctor, and then I had the tests and everything, and he said, yes, sort of like you're sort of perimenopausal, you're going into menopause. So,
Yeah.
like I said, I wasn't even sure that I was menopausal. I suspected it, and and it was and so I think that was the con of that situation. It was the not knowing, is it
Mhm.
menopause or is it something else?
Hmm. Was it would you say the pros would be like the end game of it, like you being able to come out with a book and talk about your experience? I would think that would probably be the pros of it all,
Oh,
you know.
absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I think,
I-
because I
you know.
wanted to write a piece about menopause, because, I mean, it's something that affects all women at some stage in their life. So it's certainly something that's relatable. And I would like to think that, sort of people that do read it, they get some sense of purpose out of it, that you are important, that you're not, it's not the end of the road for you just because, you're
Yeah.
going into menopause. There's still life after menopause.
Is there any specific advice that you can give to someone that is going through or that will go through menopause and may find themselves in a lockdown situation while going through menopause? Is there any advice that you could suggest?
I think, the only advice I would give is probably, try to eat a lot of foods that are rich in like soy products or things like that, because though apparently that's very good for topping up your low estrogen levels.
Okay, so staying focused on your health while you're
Yeah,
going
staying
through
focused on
that.
your health, trying to eat things that will sort of like help increase your estrogen levels and sort of kind of balance out the moods.
Okay, so with that being said, looking back, what part of that experience still stays with you the most?
Gosh, what part of that stays with me the most? I think certainly the writing aspect of it, because that's where the writing journey started for me, was during lockdown. But I think also there was the aspect of having my two youngest sons at home. I mean, as I'm not to say it wasn't without its stress having two teenage boys in the house, but at the same time, it also gave us a lot of shared family time together, and I and
Hmm.
I and I did enjoy that.
Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine how old were your boys at that time?
Well, I mean, my youngest son, I think, was 14, and my other son was 16.
Oh, okay. So they're up in that age.
Yeah,
'Cause I have like nieces that are around that age, so I totally understand they're kind of up there, especially
yeah. And then
pretty.
you had obviously all the disruptions with
Mhm.
school, where they had to be doing sort of online learning and
Yep.
everything. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Everything was from home.
yeah,
Everything was from home. So I can only imagine what kind of peace you can get when everything's at home. The peace is very limited. The
it is.
the self me time is very
Yeah.
limited. So I can only imagine. Hmm.
Definitely, and I was the main carer for my parents as well, and and I was always so nervous about who I was in contact with, or who that I might pick up something and pass it on to my parents, because they are very elderly and vulnerable. If they got COVID, it could possibly kill them, and I was it was that constant worry.
So it was like a real anxious time for you when you were going through COVID. Just being
Yeah,
anxious of, will I pass it to somebody? Am I going to catch it? I'm helping these people. I'm helping my people. I don't want to bring nothing over. I'm trying to be extra safe. So it sounds like you were on edge during
yeah,
that time a lot.
definitely, yeah.
Hmm. Uh, what would you say, what does creativity mean to you compared to before the lockdown?
Also, I think creativity, what it means to me, it's it's kind of like, I think it's an emotional narrative on life. Like, for example, poetry is you know express emotional expression in words, and what we try to do as writers is invoke that same emotion, the emotion
Mhm.
that gave us that inspiration for that piece, to invoke that same emotion in our readers.
So was that your same mindset when before COVID, before the lockdown, or did it take you a while to get to that place?
I think it took me a while to get to that place, because it's not like I haven't written terrible poetry before. I have written some terrible pieces, and I've kind of come back to them later and thought, oh, this is absolutely no good, and just sort of like deleted it. So yeah, I think it was a gradual process where I kind of sort of just got to the point where I thought, you know what, um, I'm at a point now where I can, I understand my emotions better, and I've made sense of them, so I can understand why I feel this way or why I feel that way. And there may be many people out there who don't necessarily understand why they're feeling this way, or and so when I was writing, I was thinking, right, okay, let me try to sort of some sort of structure where the person reading it can make sense and think, actually, yeah, this makes sense. This helped me sort of emotionally
Mhm.
unravel what I was feeling.
Okay, so did writing this change how you understand your own mind and resilience?
Oh, definitely. Oh, absolutely. I think, sort of to get published, I mean, I got published at 51. If you told me in my 20s, or in my 30s, that I would be published at 51, I would have thought that you were crazy, So, but I mean, to get published, I think, that's probably one of the biggest confidence boosts you can get. So that a publisher has seen your work, and they've liked what they've read, and they think that it's worth publishing and that more people should be exposed to it. it. So I think that's the biggest confidence boost you can get. So yeah, so when I landed my publisher with the first book, I think, right, yes, I can do this. I can actually do this.
So speaking of that, like, were there a lot of moments where it was like unexpected growth that surprised you while you were writing?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think so. I think my parents were always very critical growing up. So I think, I had that narrative in my head where I was always very critical of myself, where even when I achieved something, I would underplay it and say, well, yeah, I mean, I think, it was a conversation I had with my sister where I was talking to her because I was looking for a publisher for the second book. And then I was saying, oh, well, I'm not sure that it's going to happen for me again. I think maybe the first publication was just beginner's luck. And then my sister said to me, listen to yourself. If you knew an author who had been published, would you say to them, oh, it's just beginner's luck, that it's not going to happen again? Or would you be really proud of them and impressed? I said, well, obviously the latter. And so she said, well, why do you think that this is an acceptable way to speak to yourself? And,
Right.
and I think it was that moment of clarity where I kind of examined that question and I thought, actually, you have a point. It's not acceptable to speak to ourselves so unkindly. But I think I had always had that narrative in my head because my parents growing up were also very critical.
And you know what I really question? Why do the artist, the one with the talent, why can't they stop and recognize that they are the art? Why is it so hard to recognize that you're the masterpiece behind this? That you've created this baby, if it's now blossomed. What is so what is the difficult part of noticing that you've found a goal, you've accomplished the goal, and now you should just sit back and reward yourself, pat yourself on the back, understand that you've gotten through a major milestone, especially when it comes to authors, writers,
Yeah,
storytellers. It takes a lot to tell a story. It takes a lot to go through an experience and say to yourself, I want to connect this with the next person. I want to go from private to publish. I mean public. So
yeah,
it takes a lot to do that. So it's like, when do you stop and recognize that you've done it? You've done it. You've done the goal. You've gotten to the goal.
yeah,
You don't have to rush to the next book. You already know the next book is gonna come. You know you're gonna do it.
yeah.
You did the first one. You don't have to rush the process. Like,
Yeah,
you
this
have.
is very common within artists. I mean, I've met so many artists, and I think a lot of us suffer from imposter syndrome, don't we?
Yeah, it's
Where
like, live in the moment.
like somebody once like described me as a writer, and I was like, well, really? And I'm not sure about that. And yeah, you're a writer. I mean,
Yeah, you
yeah, I
you're
suppose
not
so.
just a writer, but writer is one of your titles, one of your many tools in your belt. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
You don't put yourself in a box when there's so much more to you, and
yeah,
the book shows it. Like you say, that you went through publishing. You didn't just write the book and then hand it off. You actually took care of the book, watched it grow, went through emotional roller coasters trying to get the book out, finally got the book out, had a pep talk on along the way, and now the book is here. It's relatable, you know? It's about people that were going through mental reflections during lockdown, you
yeah,
know, self-reflection, mental reflection, trying to grow that mental, be more gentle to that mental. It was a process. It's not an easy process. It's not something that's done overnight, and it's something we still continue to have to nurture every day,
yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
So, as a writer, as an author, as an artist, I'm always curious, what mm, what's the hesitation of just stopping, living in a moment, and recognizing your work, living in the work, recognizing that, hey, that's my story.
Yeah.
I put it out there, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I
I'm
agree with
always
you. I
eager.
mean, sometimes you kind of feel under pressure because, like, once you've had a book published, and then, like, whenever you meet family or you meet friends, like, oh, so when's the next book coming out? When's the next book? Oh my God,
Yeah.
the pressure.
Oh, okay. I can see it. It's like, I think you're nervous because it's like once something is done, it sounds like you're first nervous if you're going to actually succeed. The first
Yeah,
part is like, will I succeed? Will this get to where I hope it's going to be in my brain,
yeah.
And then when it gets there, the next question is, when's the next one?
Another book, are you working on this? And I was like, gosh, if I'm not working on it, then I feel like I'm being lazy or I'm procrastinating or I'm not being as
Mm-hmm.
active as I should be. And then there's always a kind of that pressure where people are expecting the next one, and I'm just like, oh gosh.
In those moments, because I've had those moments before, even just as somebody that's interviewing people and looking into different ways to expand. I think that the best way to answer that question is to, like, especially when others are coming up to you asking you, hey, when's the next one? When's the next one? I think the best answer would be, hey, I don't let my left hand know what my right hand's doing. I've ran into those moments where I dropped the episode, or when I had an interview and then somebody in my family's like, so when are you coming out with your next one? So who
Yeah.
are you going to interview next? So it's just like when you write a book and then your family asks you or your friends ask you, so what are you doing next? Are you working on a book? Are you writing anything? You're probably writing something, right? Whole time you're probably at home doing nothing. But as artists, that's how your brain flows.
Yeah.
And I think you should light off the pressure and just tell yourself, I don't let my left hand know what my right hand's doing. So to them, when you are working, don't over express it. Don't over talk about it.
Yeah.
Because when you're not working, then you're like, I'm just taking a natural break. You get what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I'm navigating mentally where I'm going to start next. You know? That
Yeah.
looks different for everybody. Some people actually need to not be doing anything to figure out when my next book is going to come out, When's my
Yeah.
next project? So I don't think you should be don't feel too pressured when people are asking you, when's the next book? What's the next project? Are you writing? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Try not to feel too pressured about that because it's natural, but it's just best to remember that as an artist, I gotta do things my way to give out my best work.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. And
And
this is
that
why I
looks
say, because then people are like, what is your process of writing? And I think, generally my process of writing it's a pretty unstructured process in the sense that I write if there's inspiration, if I'm inspired by a situation, whether it's political or emotional or whatever, and I'll get like the first couple of lines or the first stanza in my mind, and I'll run with it. And I often kind of feel like the poem writes me rather than I'm writing the poem, because
there you
you
go.
just kind of get the first thread of the poem and you follow the thread wherever it takes you.
That's just life. And that's the thing. Everybody process is different. So if someone even asks you like, hey, what's your process? The best answer you can let them know is, hey, my process might not work for you because it's my process. It's
Yeah,
for me. So yeah, sometimes I wake up and there's no words. Other days I might wake up, there's nothing but words.
exactly. Yeah.
So that looks different for any and everybody, but you gotta listen to yourself. You gotta find different remedies and different ways to actually tune into yourself to let those words flow,
Yeah.
Everybody's remedy looks different. I was wondering if lockdown never happened, do you think this version of you would exist?
Gosh, that's an interesting question, isn't it? um I don't think so. I had this conversation with my sister where she said to me, there's two versions of you. She said to me, there's Naima, before you were published and name her after you were published. And she said to me, and the difference is really, really stark. She said to me, because, like before you were published, you were always undermining yourself, you were always questioning yourself, and she said to me, and when you got published, I noticed there was a shift in you. You just seemed like more confident in yourself. There was more self-belief in yourself. So I think, probably if lockdown hadn't happened, possibly, there would be a different version of me today. Yes.
I like that. I like that it really puts you through your trials and tribulations. It had you really step back and thank yourself, recognize yourself,
Yeah.
really notice yourself, bring the confidence to the upfront, bring the positive thoughts to the upfront. Because our mental really sets us in a way where we have a positive thought and then we have a negative thought.
Yeah.
So it really depends on which thought we feed into the most. And it sounds like before your process, before your experience with the lockdown, you maybe was feeding the negative thought the
Yeah.
most. And now you're in the area, you're in a phase where you can feed the positive thought the most.
Yeah, I think, it was a point where you kind of sit down and you say to yourself, rather than focus on the things that I haven't done,
Yeah,
look at what you have achieved.
exactly. And there you go. Right in front of you. Look at the things you have done. And believe it or not, each thing you've probably done has not been done overnight. It was nothing you get done, you got right as soon as you got it done. It was probably a process. How did isolation reshape your view of connection and relationships?
Connected very closely with my children during lockdown, but I think it certainly made me value my close friendships, and the people that that are in my circle more, because we weren't able to see each other during lockdown. I mean, we did have phone conversations, but it's not the same as
Mm-hmm.
spending time with people that you care about and that you enjoy spending time with. So yeah, I think it certainly made me appreciate them more, and learn not to be so negligent in my day-to-day life in terms of keeping in touch with people.
Okay. And could you say that you understand your experience differently now that you did back then?
Yeah, definitely. I think, for me, I can understand the COVID period. Certainly, the first lockdown for me, it was a period of healing. Definitely a period of healing, but also a period of growing as a human being.
Okay.
Definitely. And that's
Okay.
how I see it now. When I was in the thick of it, I didn't necessarily see it that way. It just felt like, I had an explosion of emotions and words in my head, and I couldn't possibly make sense of them.
Okay. And how would you say that your perspective on that period evolved over the last few years?
I mean, I think it's evolved in the sense that I've been able to kind of, let's say, adapt, for want of a better word, to the process of the menopause.
Okay. Was that the biggest adjustment?
Whereas, I was able to speak to my doctor. I was able to sort of get sort of patches to help with things like the brain fog and the forgetfulness and things like that, and that certainly helped in that sense. And because it kind of eased some of the symptoms, it left the mind clearer to be able to see the whole picture. Sort of going into menopause is not the end, but more the beginning of another chapter.
Okay. When you say seeing things more clearly, what is it specifically that time and distance allows you to see more clearly? What was it?
I think because I don't get so much of that brain fog anymore. Because I mean, that brain fog is absolutely horrendous during menopause, where you're kind of like you're talking to someone or you're having a conversation and your mind just goes blank and you completely lose track of what you were saying, and you're thinking, what was I saying again? What was I saying again? And and I think, there were times where I because my father had also been diagnosed with dementia. There were moments where I was kind of freaking out and thinking, oh my God, am I getting dementia? Is this, early onslaught dementia? Am I seeing the early signs of dementia? And, so I think being diagnosed as menopause was certainly a relief, in the sense that, I'd rather have menopause than the early onset of dementia.
Okay.
So it ruled out that.
Okay, so did it start to make you like overthink a lot?
I think it made me very emotional. Yes, definitely.
Okay. So it was more like an emotional roller coaster.
And I'd be like teary, and then there were times where I'd feel, full of energy, and it just seemed to go from one extreme to the other. And there were also, days where I just felt like I had absolutely no direction whatsoever, and I would just be in my robe at home all day. I wouldn't leave the house. I wouldn't do anything.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's going to be hard to answer this question, but do you think it would have been a better experience for you, or I wouldn't even say better because it's still an experience, but do you think you would have preferred an experience going through your menopause not during lockdown? Would you preferred, hey, if the doors were open, I had community, I had people to turn to, do you prefer that versus going through it during lockdown, barely can touch people, you're very anxious, who you go around? Which one would you kind of prefer?
I think I would have preferred to have the experience outside of lockdown, because then obviously I would have been able to see the doctor sooner, and he would have been able to sort of help me sooner, rather than where I went through months of, sort of where my mind was a mess. I was totally emotional. I had no idea what was happening to me. So yeah.
Okay. Did you have much community, or like did you have people virtually around that time?
Not a lot, to be honest. I think it was really just with my two youngest children at home. I mean, I would make daily visits to my parents because I was their main carer. A close friend who I spoke to about it, but I think outside of that, I didn't really have that much support. I did remember one time when just after menopause, or just after COVID had finished and lockdown had been lifted, I met my eldest son, and he asked me. He said to me, "Mum," he said to me, "have you started menopause?" And I looked at him and I kind of smiled, and I said to him, "Isn't that a funny question to come from a man?" He says, "Oh no, because I saw a program about women going into menopause the other day and blah blah blah, and I was concerned about you." And I said to him, "Yes, I have started menopause, and I'm trying to get to see the doctor."
Yeah, how did that?
And then, bless him, he was sitting there giving me all this advice. "Mum, you should be eating this, and you should be doing this. I heard this is really good for women going through menopause." And I thought it was such a lovely moment where you had a man who was showing genuine concern about a woman who's going through menopause. Because often, sort of like in the world of men, menopause is dismissed as women being erratic and crazy or whatever.
It's nice to have your child be the one that's kind of being the comforting friend in that time, just making sure you're okay, trying to help you stay on it, not picking at you about it, but being really supportive.
Yeah.
During that time.
Have you seen a doctor? Are you getting any support? I was like, oh, that's so sweet that you actually thought to ask me about that.
Yeah, did it really hit you on an emotional level to see that your kids are just with you on this roller coaster?
Absolutely. I just kind of like scooped him up in a big hug, and I was like, "Oh, you're such a sweetheart. That's so kind of you to actually ask about that."
Yeah. Well, look, that just lets you know Mama's doing right, okay? Yeah.
Generally, men tend to sort of kind of avoid women's issues, and So
Yes, or they're very not they're very unsure of what words to use in that predicament,
yeah,
what to say, how to say it. So it's good that they were just being brave enough to say, "Hey, I'm here. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but mom, you should try this, try that, do
yeah.
this." So it's nice to just see them try.
Well, I mean, the second book was published, Saging, Not Aging. That the second book was published. I suppose that will stay with me.
What do you really hope from readers to feel immediately after finishing this book?
I hope that they feel that the pieces in the book have touched on issues that they can relate to and has helped them better understand them emotionally.
Mm-hmm. Is it more of just trying to really express yourself, deep dive, getting deep in diving into how to be emotionally vulnerable to certain moments like this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, there's certainly an element of soul searching in the book, and kind of like it closes with the kind of feeling that sort of we've kind of sifted through all the pieces of ourselves, and we've reached the finish line as the complete article, and a better understanding of ourselves.
And with COVID, it brought a lot of silence, like a lot of silence.
Yeah.
What would you say that the silence taught you in that moment?
It's a funny thing with silence. I think certainly with me, I'm not a huge fan of it, but because I think I'm a very social person, and I enjoy being around other people, and often where in the silence, I found that my mind often tended to go to very dark places.
Mm-hmm.
So I would kind of try to avoid that. I mean, I suppose in the book, what I did was I did kind of sort of rather than try to kind of like avoid facing my thoughts and my feelings and just sort of shutting it off. I thought, I actually just jump into those feelings and explore them. And I kind of sort of did that with the poetry, and I was hoping that in doing that, it would probably help other people who maybe felt a similar way to make more sense of their own emotions.
Outside of writing, do you try to navigate with silence now that you're outside of writing the lockdown book and you're outside of being forced to be in so much silence? Do you practice navigating in silence now that you have the option to shut it off and turn it back on? Because versus in lockdown, we really didn't have that option. Everything was quiet, everything was shut down, couldn't go anywhere. But now, really, you have that option. You could stay home.
It's nice to have that little shutdown sometimes, where you just shut out the world and just sort of focus on yourself.
You say it's still uncomfortable to navigate, or did you get past that and was able to get
I think
a
that,
level of comfortability living
it's
inside?
slightly uncomfortable because sometimes you're delving into things that are sort of painful or embarrassing even. But I mean, it's mildly
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable, but not so comfortable that it would prevent you from doing that. It's kind of like it's worth the discomfort if I'm going to be able to
Yeah.
produce a piece that maybe speaks to my readers.
Okay. Did releasing this book release any internal stress that you had?
I don't think it released any stress. I think I was probably more stressed before it was published. But I think once it was published, I didn't necessarily feel stressed. I mean, I think probably the only stress I felt was as we discussed earlier is the pressure of what are you doing next? What have you got planned next? What are you doing next? And it's like you constantly feel that you need to be doing something, you need to be active within the writing community.
Okay, I see that. So it's like more the stress came afterwards. It was not
Yeah,
during the process. It was more like, okay, once this is done, what am I going to do next?
Yeah.
I can see that. Well, my last question to you, I would like to know if someone is listening and feels alone right now, what would you say to them directly?
I would say to them, talk to people that you feel safe and comfortable with, and mental health or struggling with your emotions. It's not a weakness. I think it takes a lot of strength to confront those feelings and those emotions.
Hmm. I want to say that I do thank you for finding the time to put pen to paper for writing COVID, the whirly winds, and mine under lockdown. Because I had to go back and do my research and ask myself, what made an author write about a time like this? I was honest, being honestly speaking, I'm being full transparent. I asked myself that. Then I concluded that there was a lot of self reflection, a lot of people that went through COVID, because I even went through COVID, but I didn't really have a much huge impact. The most that I was able to navigate was finding things that I love to do outside of corporate,
Yeah.
any corporate situation. That was the most that I was navigating through. So I also further educated myself to realize that a lot of authors, artists, that was a process in time for them. So
Yeah.
it didn't happen until you got out of the time. You were able to actually process what just happened, being
Yeah.
still like that. I was very curious. What makes Nima want to keep talking about this book? Why COVID? Why why after so many years? It's because you're still processing what happened. You're still processing the growth that you have experienced, the transformation of what happened. The world really was in a huge moment. Like that was something we've never been through.
Yeah.
So to go through that, to experience that halt on the world, a lot of artists are still trying to figure out, how do I communicate these feelings? How do I put that pen to paper in that moment? You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
be navigating, how do I talk about menopause while I'm going through menopause on a lockdown? Even after this, how do I have the confidence to still want to push the book out? You get what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it was like a full roller coaster, and that's why I was very excited to sit down with you and get more information, more heart about the book. You know.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a tremendous book. It was a pleasure sitting with you as well. Um,
Likewise, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
of course. Thank you so much for joining us for this powerful conversation. If this discussion resonated with you, be sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to check out COVID, the whirly winds of a mind under lockdown, and continue supporting meaningful stories like this. Until next time, stay curious and stay inspired.